Good afternoon, folks. We are live once again. Let me get everything switched over and we will dive back into drawing horrible monster abominations. There we go. Let me turn on the BGM playlist. Let's see, I'll leave the volume about there for now. We'll see if I need to tweak it later. We're running through the standard BGM playlist that should include the new stuff that just came out recently. How's everybody doing today? I see Red Dragon is here. What's up, Red Dragon? Welcome to the drawing stream. Hope you're having a decent, Thursday for you. Alright, so what I've done is I've reloaded the template just to do a quick recap of what we're doing, and then we will continue where we left off last time, and we'll start working on a new Fusion sketch primary for us to play around with. So for those who weren't here on the last stream or any of the other ones when I've been working on this project, our Giant says, Thursday here, how are you? I'm doing all right, and today was busy. It's busy every day. I don't know why I bother saying that when it's a work day, but not too bad. Bunch of meetings, a lot of phone calls, but nothing terrible. It is a holiday weekend for those of us here in America land. On Monday, a lot of us have the day off, so I'm just trying to make it to the weekend. And I will be traveling to a convention this weekend, which I can talk a little bit about. I know I'm going to talk about it probably Sunday. Hey, Sour Lad's here. What's up, Sour Lad? Welcome to the stream. Good to see you as always. So I'll put this here. There we go. I want to make some notes just so I can refer back to this later. I'll be probably working on this on several streams. But last time we sketched out, in fact, I'll show it off here too. We can collapse this stuff, and I'll show the sketch we kind of finished last time. And we'll go from there. There it is. Okay, recap, then I'll explain what we did last time and then talk about what we're doing today. Zarlet said, can't sleep, just going to chug an energy drink for the night. That sounds like a real physical challenge. I'm assuming you got night shift again. That's rough. Being on night shift will just destroy your body's circadian rhythm. You can do it when you're younger, but it's definitely not sustainable, especially when you become old. I already keep terrible hours, but if I've had to go for like a night shift instead of working during the day, I'm sure I would die. Okay, quick project recap. We're doing a triple fusion using Monster Hunter creatures. There we go. And what we have are 3 components that go into our fusion that come from the various games in the Monster Hunter series. Each one of these creatures has its own type of species or designated type in the whole Monster Hunter lore, as it were. In Monster Hunter, pretty much everything is a wyvern, the exception of some of the more kind of mammal-like mammalian beasts. Everything else is considered a wyvern in quotes, even though really true wyvern body type looks like Diablos here, with wing arms and 2 legs. But Monster Hunter kind of classifies everything as a wyvern. Her dragon says, people sleep at night. I know, it's weird. I have a terrible time falling asleep at night, which means I usually only sleep a couple hours every day, and then I have to take a nap in the afternoon, or I am just dead by the evening. I've been working on trying to get better with it, but when I have to log in super early and start work, that tends to make it difficult. So of our 3 fusion components, and I'll explain not only why I chose each of these just briefly, but also the typing. So first one up here, this kind of T-Rex angry dinosaur looking one, is Deviljho, 3rd generation monster, and its typing is Brute Wyvern. And the Brute Wyverns tend to have this sort of dinosaur body shape like this. They tend to be a bit more horizontal, and they usually have small, little stubby forelimbs. This one down here, this is Agnaktor, another 3rd generation monster, but its type is Leviathan. Leviathans tend to be quadrupedal, and usually walk around on all 4s, and they tend to have longer, more serpentine bodies. A lot of the Leviathans in Monster Hunter are aquatic, but not all of them. Agnaktor here, as you can tell by its coloring and its overall design, is volcanic. It lives in a volcano zone and is fond of burrowing underground into molten lava. And it's a fire element. Deviljho is a dragon element. And number 3 is Diablos. Diablos is a 1st or 2nd generation monster. It has been in the series forever. On the topic of being tired, Red Dragon says, I think that's just being old. Yeah, well, as a senior citizen, I should have a better sleep schedule, but I have so many things that I work on late at night because I don't have time during the day most days. It just comes down to not having enough time to sleep. And especially when I stream. When I stream, it pushes everything later, like a couple hours, because I basically go from my job directly to streaming, and then I have, the rest of the evening to get all my stuff done. So if I'm gonna go to the gym or I have to cook, I have to cram all that stuff in there, and then it usually ends up being late. But that's all right. Oh yeah, and the typing for Diablos is Flying Wyvern, usually indicative of these ones that have wing arms, but not always the case. And it doesn't have an element. Diablos is technically just raw damage. It doesn't have an elemental type tied to it. Ooh, and I see we have our usual 5 hydrates from Red Dragon. Make me chug my smoothie. Okay, so we have the 3 ingredients, and the point of the fusion, which is why I wanted to show the diagram again for folks who haven't seen it, we are going to be fusing these monsters 2 at a time, and I'll try not to go through this every single stream, just because I know Red Dragon's been here a couple times. He's probably sick of hearing me explain this. But we're going to be fusing these in pairs first. So if we think of Deviljho as 1, Agnaktor as 2, and Diablos is 3. Our first fusion is going to be these 2. There should be another line up here, but I'll have to fix this design diagram later. And our resulting fusion will be this one right here, so this will be 1. Actually, let's do letters. Let's call this fusion A. And this is the one I'll show off once we get done explaining this. We have to choose a type based on the ingredients, and this one we already know is a brute. And then we have to fuse number 2 and 3 together. We'll call this one B. And we didn't decide on this one. I think this one's going to be a Leviathan. And then logically moving clockwise, our last one is going to be between this one and this one, 3 and 1. And this will be fusion C. Logically, if we were to choose the remaining type, it's going to be flying. Hopefully, we'll be able to sketch out some primaries for one for sure, but hopefully 2. That way, if we can get all the way through that, then it'll be time to start inking and coloring things, maybe in the next stream. Just depends on how long I spend talking and not drawing. But before the fusion is complete, once we have A, B, and C, our last fusion is going to be here in the middle, but it's not a fusion of all 3 components, which is usually what people assume, right? Instead, it's a fusion of the fusions A, B, and C. So whatever we end up creating for A, B, and C, those attributes have to be fused in the final one, which we're going to call X, in the middle. So if we have a bunch of specific things that are showing up on the brute, we've got to carry those forward in the final. If we have things in the Leviathan, likewise, we have to kind of combine all those elements together, and it basically makes it a little more of a challenge than just combining 3. And I followed this format from one of my favorite artists who didn't invent the format. He's done a lot of videos on this, as a fellow named Plague of Gripes. Really talented artist, and he's done some cool things with fusions, so I've adopted this sort of model from him. This is the same format we used when we did the first round like 2 years ago. And also we have to pick a type for fusion X in the middle. And I think I'm leaning towards a Leviathan, just because putting all of these really interesting design elements together into a Leviathan is going to create something really monstrous, pun intended. I'm tempted to do that, but if I change my mind, maybe I'll go brute. We'll see. We'll see what the results are, and then see if that changes the decision. But for now, I'm going to say Leviathan. And so our end results should be a fully mapped out diagram with 4 fusions, 3 stage 1s, and 1 super fusion at the end. And so we'll see how we get there. But in the meantime, what I've got here are the 3 components to give me a reference without having to be flipping layers on and off the whole time. We've got Deviljho, Agnaktor, and Diablos for reference. We did these 2 last time. And I meant to go grab the name. I think I said it was like Devilactor, basically just a portmanteau of the combined creatures' names, just matching them together. Let me go see if I can find that. But in the meantime, here's the sketch primary, which could be subject to change in the final version. But right now, this is a pretty detailed sort of combination of these 2 that we came up with on the stream last time. Now, let me see where I put that. A document that has all of the fusion information. Let's see. Oh, it's over here. Oh, Agnaktor, that's what it was. So the brute type is Agnaktor. I'll put those names on here before I forget again. So this is Agnaktor. Next one we'll do the Leviathan one, moving clockwise again, since the idea is kind of fresh in my mind. And that one's Diaktor. So create a new sketch here. I'll just name it now so I don't forget. All right. So let's hide Angry Pickle. I put Diablos right here. So starting completely from scratch, we got to think of a good pose that's going to show off the design elements for this particular combination of monsters. I'll zoom in a bit because I'll probably be starting the sketch a little bit small, then maybe scaling it up and building it from there. So keeping in mind Leviathan, long body. It doesn't have to necessarily be on all fours. We could do a pose that might show off its features a bit, since both of these monsters, interestingly enough, have a tendency to burrow underground. Diablos is encountered in the desert, kind of dry, arid environments like the deserts. Not really volcanic. It doesn't show up in volcanoes. But when you run into Diablos, it's very fond of charging and running you over, but it also burrow into the sand to try and come up at your feet and gore you with its massive horns. So what we could do is kind of bridge the gap a little bit and do a Leviathan type that you would find in the desert. And we're going to have to scale that down a bit. I think we'll definitely lose the wings, since Leviathans don't have wings. They can't fly. But we might be able to adapt some of the features that you see on Diablos, mainly its armor. It's got kind of a thick shell plating that helps it mitigate damage. One thing we'll definitely want to include are the horns, for sure. And I can't remember if we did this last time. I think way back, this would have been maybe 2 sessions ago when we were working on these fusions. We did kind of like a close-up headshot to come up with some ideas for what would go into the head and kind of inform the rest. That might not be a bad idea here. I did not sketch out any concepts when I came up with this idea before, so we're doing everything from scratch here today. But since the last one focused kind of on Agnaktor's beak, what we could do is have Diablos be the kind of more dominant series of traits that we're seeing on this one. Let's see, thinking 3/4. And its horns kind of come out this way. So we could do something like this where we definitely keep the horns and sort of adapt the shape of the mouth and combine some of the elements with Agnaktor without just doing the beak itself. And Diablos has these kind of pronounced tusks that extend forward too. Well, that's an idea. We could make the lower jaw kind of resemble Agnaktor's beak, so it's kind of like half and half on the face. That's a possibility. My thought would be, again, kind of keep it serpentine, so kind of a long, flexible neck, but instead of it having the fins like we have up here, it's going to focus more on like armored plating. And kind of run down the length like that. And we could even like change how it's textured too, maybe make it a little more spiky. Even make it a bit more kind of like a crest. Diablos kind of has this, I think it's ceratopsian type of design, like a dinosaur, similar to something you'd see like a Triceratops, but it's only got 2 horns instead of 3. I think there's a dinosaur that was sort of based off of that does have kind of 2 horns, but I don't remember its species. I bet Lava King would know. He's a dinosaur guy. I think we'd want to have the forehead a little more pronounced. These are coming out of the side, not the front. We could do something like that. It's not bad for a real rough start with the head. So we'll keep that over there and kind of keep that idea in mind as we work on trying to figure out the base pose. Should be, yeah, right here. So we could definitely work with what we have here and maybe do kind of like a, not really jumping pose. The reason why I drew it this way would be kind of like this thing is leaping out of the sand to attack. So to that end, maybe instead of just like a closed mouth, do something like this. And give it the angry eyes. So that's a possibility. You could also do kind of a more grounded position similar to what Agnaktor is doing here, but maybe make it coil a little more. What we'll do is we'll kind of experiment with a couple ideas. In fact, I'm going to do this at a small scale so it won't take up as much space, and just sort of see what takes shape. So while I'm messing around with just basic shapes here, coming up with an idea for the pose, I mentioned before Sarlad says drill attack. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, to go into the lore a little bit. So for Agnaktor here, the Fire Leviathan, the way it burrows into the ground is it corkscrews. So if this is the ground like this, usually it's volcanic rock with lava underneath, or magma, whatever the below surface term is. So Agnaktor will spiral into the ground like that, going down, in order to drill, like literally like a drill, into the ground, and then it will do this sort of swimming pattern where it almost breaches, kind of like a whale or a fish, and comes in and out of the ground to attack. All the while it's spinning the whole time. I think its body is kind of designed with these ridges and these things to kind of cut through the ground in order for it to move. In addition, it can also burrow into the ceiling. If it's a low ceiling like this, it'll go upwards and burrow into the ceiling, so this thing can pop out all over the place, and it's pretty challenging to deal with because Agnaktor is very fast. And there is an official render. I don't have it here on the canvas, but it's one of the coolest render concepts for Agnaktor, which has it sort of spiraling out of the ground, doing exactly what I'm saying. I could try and find it real quick and show you folks what I'm talking about. Might not be a bad reference to use, so I'll grab it and put it in here. It's either an official render or something from the concept. Yeah, I think this is official render. It's small resolution though, so this isn't a high resolution, large size ping, unfortunately. So if we take this, we'll scale it up a little. It's gonna get super fuzzy, but that's okay. I actually like the kind of pose. It shows off a bit more of kind of the scale of the fin on the dorsal fin. So in the image, you could see this sort of spiraling, twisting of Agnaktor as it comes up out of the lava and out of the ground. So that was sort of what I was going for with the position on this first sketch here. A bit more kind of upwards instead of spiraling, because trying to do like a real twisting pattern would make it a little bit challenging to draw. But we could take this as a potential idea as well. Like, if we go to one of our other layers, and we do kind of like a real quick capture of the shapes. The arm is over here. The body kind of widens out near the back, which is why you're getting the fin here. Hey, Iconic's here. What's up, Iconic? Welcome to the drawing stream. How's your day going? Hope you're having a decent hump day. We are continuing work on Monster Hunter Fusions. So looking at the way the model is twisted here, here's the line. Be a little careful here. Here's the line of the fin on the back, and it goes that way, and it's twisting right about here, and tail is twisting here. This thing's coming up. So this is the back sort of twisting around, and then it's vanishing over this side, and then this is the other angle. The legs are hard to see. They're tucked in. The Leviathans tend to have smaller hind legs, and when Agnaktor burrows in and out of the ground, it sort of tucks them in so it can spiral. So like this is one foot, this is the knee of the other leg. And Agnaktor's got this kind of fan-like tail, like a fin. And so overall, kind of dynamic, cool pose. I don't want to just wholesale rip off one that's in official art, but we could take that idea and sort of build on it a little bit. I did want to sort of flip the positioning too. I've been drawing everything facing the left, but it doesn't have to do that. So we could also keep the body, again, sticking with the kind of serpentine noodle shape for the Leviathans. We could go for a more grounded, like actually on the ground. This would be like rearing up, but I don't really like the way that looks. I think it'd be better if it was on all fours, kind of more of a prone state, if I was going to do that. The reason why I chose this particular monster type is because it's challenging to draw. So many of the casts in Monster Hunter, it's like wyvern creature with wings, but the ones that have the longer bodies, like the Leviathans, tend to be a bit more wiggly. Iconic says, how are y'all? I'm doing decently. I told the chat earlier it's been busy this week at work, but as we're coming up on a long weekend, it's just a matter of making it to the weekend. Anyway, what I was going to say earlier was, since we are doing a Monster Hunter project, and there's been a lot of news coming out of places like Gamescom, then this isn't a bad place to talk about some of the news that we've been hearing about the upcoming title, Monster Hunter Wilds. I was also telling the chat earlier, I'm going to be going to a convention this weekend. I'm traveling to the far off land of Seattle for PAX, the Penny Arcade Expo. They do the pretty large video game convention there. Prior to the pandemic, it was every year in in Seattle, which is in the state of Washington. And I have not been there since before the pandemic, so I'm going to be heading up there to check stuff out on Saturday. And I'll be able to report back since I'm supposed to be streaming Monster Hunter on Sunday, the day after. I'll be able to talk about stuff I saw, especially if they have Monster Hunter Wilds on demo at PAX. I will not be waiting in line to play it because that would pretty much take my entire day just to wait in line, but I'll definitely be looking at it. Sarlet says, by the way, you heard GameStop's going retro. No more $300 games. I didn't hear that. So what does that mean for their business model? Are they still doing like trade-ins and whatnot? What are they changing that's going to improve their pricing? I have not gone to a GameStop in probably well over a decade. Ever since I sold back my copy of DMC4 back when it was brand new, after I beat it in a week or so, and they gave me like $4 for it, and then turned around and resold it for like 30. At that point, I decided I was never gonna bother selling stuff. I'm just gonna keep a collection because that's lame. Oh, okay. Sarlat says it's a separate branch with only old games and console versus their normal stores. Oh, so they're kind of doing like a Super Potato thing where they have a separate sort of vehicle for selling like old retro stuff. That's interesting. I'd be curious to see how they mark stuff up. Okay, I'm kind of playing around with the positioning here rather than make this thing take up so much space. Let's kind of coil it around a little bit. I think this is getting closer to what I'm looking for, but the proportions I think need to be adjusted a little bit. I could even rotate this slightly so this thing doesn't look like it's putting its rear in the air. We don't want to do a Jacko pose. As funny as that would be, I don't think that's something these creatures would do out in the wild. Maybe they would. I don't know. But I'm going to assume they don't. Sarlet says, I saw they're selling 1,000 Year Door for $60 plus tax. I'd be willing to bet their markup is still going to be significant. I don't know. I'd be skeptical, but it'd be worth checking out for sure. I'm gonna add a little more bulk to this thing. Diablos is kind of a not heavy, but it's, if you take a look at its model here, I'd say it's definitely not like a slim and a trimmed down wyvern. It's a bit more bulky since its whole deal is kind of raw power. So we can keep the kind of serpentine body, but give it a little more bulk. think we definitely adapt the head. But to kind of go over what I've been seeing with the news coverage for Monster Hunter Wilds, again, Gamescom was last week. That's the one that's in Germany. And a lot of content creators in the Monster Hunter community were there, and they got a chance to play the game and have been talking about it. One of my favorite content creators in Monster Hunter, I've talked about the dude before. He's from Portugal, and he's a guy named Rurikon. And he covers kind of a lot of games. Monster Hunter is one of his big ones. And he is well known in the community for being a Gunlance main. Which is, he wasn't the reason I got into the weapon, but he definitely helped sell me on what makes it so cool. And so I get a lot of my coverage of what's new and changing with that weapon from him, since it's his main and he always covers it. He got a chance to play the demo hands-on at Gamescom, and he got to interview the 3 developers from Japan that were there at the event, just hanging out and showing stuff off. So you have like the head of production, I think he's lead producer or director, Tsujimoto. You had Tokuda and Fujioka. These 3 have worked on pretty much every major title in the series, and they were just there hanging out, watching people play the game, and meeting with some of the content creators. And I got a chance to check out Rurikon's interview with them and the questions he asked, and it definitely seems like what we're going to be getting in 25 for Monster Hunter Wilds is going to be like the next evolution of the series. For those of you who play Monster Hunter and know Monster Hunter World, it's going to be like the next evolution of that. And that's pretty exciting. I do like Rise a lot. I think Rise is currently my favorite Monster Hunter, which is not a super common take because of the nature of its gameplay, and it's a bit faster. People call it arcadey, which I don't know if I like that term so much, but it's higher paced and faster combat because you're meant to be mobile and kind of zip around with the wire bugs. Wilds is kind of bridging the gap between the slower, more methodical pace of combat in World and Iceborne, but adding some of the newer tricks in Rise. So it'll be a mix, which is also really cool to see them kind of experimenting with somewhere in the middle. Air Dragon says, I still don't know what weapon I want to go on. It's my main. Yeah, I hear you, man. Oh, we got a swear timer from Iconic. Okay. I'll do my best. I've been back and forth, Red Dragon, since a lot of the coverage on Wilds has shown off some really cool things, but there's a lot we don't know. I am considering breaking my tradition of maining a different weapon in every game in the series to go Gunlance. I'm highly considering it, which it's not like a rule I have to follow. But usually in a new Monster Hunter, I gotta change the angle on this leg. This leg looks like it's kind of broken. Usually whenever there's a new Monster Hunter game, I main a different weapon. And thinking back, I need to do a ranking of the Monster Hunter titles. Maybe I will do that in a YouTube channel video as it gets closer, because I'm thinking about doing some Monster Hunter content leading up to the release of Wilds. There is one that I'm thinking about scripting right now. I haven't done it yet because I've been busy, but I want to do like an origin story video about how I got into Monster Hunter, because I've kind of told it Cliff Notes version on stream a little bit, but kind of how I got into the series, where I started. And that would probably be like a 15 or 20, 30 minute video, depending on how fast I talk. But I would also like to do a ranking of all the games. And I played almost every single game in the series. I haven't played the very first couple. since I didn't start with the very first Monster Hunter. I am a second generation Monster Hunter, second fleeter as they call them. I started in the second generation of games, but it'd be interesting to rank everything and see where all that stuff falls. But to that end, in the very first one I played, Freedom Unite, I mained Hammer eventually. In Try on the Wii, I think I actually would have to see if I could find my save. I don't remember what I mained in that game. I want to say Hammer again because it was the second game in the series I played, and I went with what was familiar. 3 Ultimate wasn't really starting over because you could use your save data, so I don't know if that counts, but I think I focused on Switch Axe in that one. We didn't have Base 4, that was only in Japan. 4U, I think I went Charge Blade because it was the like one of the new weapons, and no one had seen it before, and it was super OP in 4U. Oh, and Portable Third, which was in between Try and 3 Ultimate. It was the one on PSP that only Japan got. I did play that one, and I think... I honestly don't remember. I don't even know if I have a save for it anymore. My PSP memory cards, last time I checked, ate a bunch of my files, and so I lost a bunch of saves from my old games. So I honestly don't remember what I did in Portable Third. I played a lot of Light Bowgun, but I did not play it from the beginning. I want to say I might have gone Dual Blades? I don't know if I've ever mained Dual Blades straight away. I usually play a lot of it, but I don't know. After 4U, we had Generations, and then World, roughly kind of a similar time frame. I think Generations first, then World, then Generations Ultimate. In Generations, honestly, I do not even remember what I mained in that one. Might have been a mix. That one might have been Gunlance for the first time. Or Gunlance as a secondary. I've never mained Longsword. But I know for World on PS4, which was the first time I played through Monster Hunter World, I mained Gunlance. That's the first time I can remember with 100% certainty in World. On PS4, I mained Gunlance. And the same thing for... Actually, no, I didn't play Iceborne on PS4. The PC version of World came out, so I actually started over and mained Greatsword in the PC version of Iceborne. And then I switched to a bunch of weapons, or for base World, Greatsword, and then I switched to a bunch of weapons in Iceborne on PC. So I haven't been back to PS4 since base World. In Generations Ultimate, I continued whatever I was doing in base Generations, and I can't remember if I played a lot of Gunlance and a lot of Heavy Bowgun in Generations Ultimate. My favorite iteration of the Heavy Bowgun was in that game. Then for Rise, again, I played it twice. I played it on Switch first, since that's what it came out on first. I mained Lance base Rise, which was a first. Never mained Lance in the history of my time playing Monster Hunter. I really liked it. Then when it came out on PC, I started over just like I did for World. And that was when I was playing primarily with Whups. We played through all of High Rank before Sunbreak came out, and I mained Hunting Horn. So first playthrough of Rise, Lance. Second playthrough on PC was Hunting Horn, which is also a first. And that pretty much catches up to the current day. So I don't know. I'm thinking of going Gunlance for Wilds. It looks incredibly fun. But I don't know. Dual Blades looks really cool too. They added some really neat stuff for that. All the weapons so far have looked awesome. So it's gonna be tough to decide. I will be streaming Wilds when it comes out for sure. Probably day one. We'll see how scheduling works, but I'll probably be streaming it day one, depending on what day it comes out. We don't have a release date for that game yet. I turn the timer off. But that's kind of like a take the day off and play Monster Hunter for like 12 hours type of thing. Red Dragon says, I think the meta will be main weapon sub hunting horns. Yeah, what Red Dragon's talking about is one of the things that's new for Wilds, the ability to take more than one weapon out on a hunt. Your mount, the Sacred, looks like the kind of feathered bird raptor that you ride around on, can stow a backup weapon for you. And you could jump on its back and then just switch out your weapons. So you don't have to just carry one, go back to camp, and get the next one. Which is a first for the series. And the hunting horn is the weapon that can bestow buffs, right? For those of you who've seen me play it, you play songs, it gives you buffs that increase different things like stats or give you other perks. And it's pretty handy in addition to being a strong attacking weapon. And like Red Dragon's saying, people have confirmed, and the devs confirmed that it was intentional, that if you bust the weapon out, play the songs to get the buffs, and then switch to your other weapon using your mount, the buffs stay. Which is interesting. That's never been a thing in the series, obviously. And some people are concerned that it's going to be kind of like a game-breaking thing. But the devs have said they're aware that it's a built-in mechanic, and they're going to work on making sure it stays balanced. So you could get an attack boosting horn, pop into a hunt, play the song to get the buff, and then swap to whatever other weapon you want to use, and you'll maintain those buffs for a certain amount of time. My guess is they're going to make it so that the timer is lowered when you're switching your weapon. So you'll get the buffs, but they won't last for very long. That's my guess as to how they're going to balance it, but we'll see. I'm definitely going to be playing Hunting Horn in Wilds. It looks really cool. Zarlet says, oh no, I smell Nerfer just buff for one attack. Yeah, it'll be something like that, where maybe your first attack when switching back to your other weapon will maintain the buffs and the song will wear off. Or it'll be, 30 seconds instead of 2 minutes. And then it's also the matter of how's it going to balance for multiplayer. Because when you use Hunting Horn in a group, everybody gets the buffs when you play a song. But if you're in a group and one person plays the horn to give everyone the buff, and then everyone else is just using their weapons, does it affect what happens to the group? Or how does it affect what happens to the group? Smarter AI. Yeah, they could adjust the behavior so if the monster sees you doing that, you're going to get targeted differently. If the monster detects that someone's closing in and then stopping to play a song and get a buff, they'll just blast you from range. It's also possible. The devs know how to balance their game. I'm pretty confident whatever they decide is going to make sense. One thing that I'm waiting to hear confirmation from Rurikon, because he would definitely have more numbers to kind of point this out, is the way the damage scaling works with the gun lance. And this is something I think I've talked about on stream before, because I use the weapon a lot. But The gun lance, as the name would suggest, has the ability to slash and poke, but its main gimmick, as it were, is the ability to use explosive shells. And they're not finite. You just have to reload your clip of shells every time. And the shells always have done basic fire damage and unscaled by hit zones. So they're not affected by monster armor or reduced damage hit zones. It always does flat damage. And the total damage done by shells, again, it's kind of a technical explanation, but all the damage is tied to its shelling level. So each gun lance that you craft has its own shelling level. And at the top of the shelling level, the gun lance doesn't get any more of a boost for the explosive shells, and then it caps. And historically, that cap has always been kind of low as the game's difficulty scales up. And unlike other skills in the game, where it'll scale based on your attack stat, like your raw attack stat, it would just be sort of a total figure that would lose its effectiveness as you get further into the game. Well, apparently, based on what people are saying, and other people who play Gunlance too, not just Rurikon, are saying in Wilds, the shelling damage appears to be scaled to attack now. So if your attack parameter goes up, your total explosive damage goes up instead of it just being flat forever based on the level of shelling. And if that's the case, that is a massive positive change for the Gunlance. Like, that is an absolute game changer for its viability as a high damage weapon. So I'm kind of curious to see what people are able to find from what they've done in the footage. Because Gunlance mains have been complaining forever that compared to other things that have regular attack-based scaling, the damage just lags, and you can still play the weapon till end game, and everybody does that plays the weapon, but it's tough to get competitive hunt times when you lose on that damage scaling at the end. So we'll see. Again, pretty hopeful based on what people are saying now, but I want to see some kind of numbers behind what's going on. Because one thing that I've seen a couple people mention that sort of supports the idea that they changed the scaling is people were using the hunting horn buff that we were talking about to buff the Gunlance, and they're noticing the numbers change when they do that and they shell, versus when they just take the Gunlance out and start poking things without any buff. So when they used the hunting horn buff and then started shelling, the damage went up, which has never been something that happened before. If you played Gunlance in the old games and you had a hunting horn user in your party and they buff everyone's attack, because it's not tied to the attack stat, you wouldn't see any change in your shells. Your pokes would get buffed, but not your explosions. So we'll see. I'm pretty optimistic on that, since it'd be a massive game changer. But between that and all of the new combos and things the Gunlance can do, it looks like a really fun weapon. A lot of the combos seem to flow into each other. And there's a bunch of different paths to how you can do the regular mix of pokes, slashes, and the shelling mixed in. I don't think Blast Dash is coming back, though, which I'm a little bummed by, since I really like being able to do the rocket through the air move with the Gunlance. It's great for mobility, but I don't think it's going to be a thing. That's fine. There is one other mechanic to the Gunlance that I'm really curious to see if they confirm, and it has to do with the quick reload, which is where you flip the Gunlance out and you basically reload its chamber of shells just its firing shells, not the worm stake. And I can kind of explain it when I'm playing Monster Hunter next and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. But in the past, it would reload shells a certain amount depending on which game you're looking at. But in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, for the Valor fighting style or hunting style, the quick reload had a guard point. And so what that means is when you do the quick reload and you're reloading your clip of shells, you can block an attack with the animation of flipping your gun lance out because your shield would be in front of you. So you could use it as a quick parry on anything. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a game, and the reason why I still think GU gun lance is my favorite. Rise gun lance is pretty close because of the tools you get. But the ability to just whip out a quick reload as a combo interrupter and just parry roars, parry blasts, anything was so cool. And I don't know if you can do that in Wilds. I haven't seen the full in-depth breakdown that Rurikon's working on for the gun lance. But if they do that, then that might sway my decision to main the weapon in Wilds, if they have that ability. We've already confirmed that perfect guarding for another parry is a thing, so that makes me think there's probably not going to be guard point, but we'll see on quick reload. Because people are saying if you do just a regular block with the gun lance's shield and you do it in perfect timing, you get a parry, which is really cool. That's also not been a baked in thing. It's been a switch skill in Rise. And it was in GU as one of the styles. All right, just putting some detail on the toes here. There's the other foot. You can sort of see it. I'll decide if I want to keep that in there or not. Likewise, here's the other hand. Thinking about adding more spines to the back to give kind of more armor. Maybe give it more of a kind of pronounced brow. We can even make this go a little further back to resemble the frill that Diablos has. Like so, and maybe give it a bit more on the sharp edges. Another thing that I know some of us have been talking about, and I'll kind of talk about it here for the sake of discussion with Monster Hunter Wilds, that was really big news last week, and I can't remember if I mentioned it on stream, but they confirmed that armor pieces are no longer gender locked in Monster Hunter Wilds, which is a first for the series too. I know I've gone through this a little bit in my playthrough of Rise, but in Monster Hunter series, going back to the beginning, there's always been separate sets for male hunters and female hunters, and they're different. They would have different models and different designs. For the most part, I think the female outfits would be more revealing, but not in every case. You had sets like the Elder Dragon Kieran, the Lightning Horse, where everyone has kind of like the really revealing kind of stripper outfit, both the male and female, which is fun. But you couldn't swap pieces. Basically, if you chose a male hunter, you could only wear the male armor. Female hunter could only wear the female armor. Red Dragon says, I've seen that, but I haven't seen any details about it. Yeah, it's really kind of simple the way they've done it. So basically, it looks like there's going to be an A set and a B set for an armor. And you can just mix and match whatever you want on your hunter. So if you like the A set helm, but the B set body or feet or waist or hands, you can just put whatever you want on your hunter. You want to have like a real grizzled bearded guy wearing the wedding dress from Lollabarina, you can just do that. And that's something that the series hasn't had. But it's a really cool idea, since sometimes sets just look better on one than the other, and now you just have free reign to choose, and I think that's awesome. I know I've talked about on my Rise playthrough, I play a female hunter in those games, and the female armor is, I think, a little bit more kind of balanced in its design in Rise compared to some of the other games, but you still have a situation where like the female armor will be 80% covered and then bare thighs for some reason. And if I could just swap to the male version to have it completely covered, it would look better. Red Dragon says, so I can have my mountain dude in a bronze skirt? Yep. You can do whatever you want. I imagine there'll be the layered armor option for cosmetic and transmog too. But just the idea that you can mix and match, I think, is really cool. There are some weirdos complaining that it was gonna change the experience, but honestly, it's just giving you more options for customization, and I think that's good in the long run, no matter what. Just give people the option to do whatever they want. Other games where you can have armor, like MMOs and other things, do that already. It's just, you can wear whatever. But yeah, really looking forward to that and just seeing what kind of fashion stuff people come up with. And the armor designs themselves, from what we've seen in just the gameplay reveals, look really cool. People were wondering if the restriction on the gender sets means they were just going to start toning down designs. Does not look like they're toning designs at all, like down. They're still really varied and a lot of detail, which again is pretty awesome. Yeah, like Red Dragon saying, you change it for the better and fun. Fashion is key in Monster Hunter. That is absolutely true. Prior to Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, I want to say, not base Generations, and World, you did not have transmog. I think it was in Generations Ultimate. I don't think the base game had it, but the way you did it was really annoying, because you essentially have to craft the whole armor piece and then change it into something else. And then when they created World, they just made layered armor a thing, where you buy the layered armor, you just put it over whatever you want, and it changes its appearance. Wild is going to have that, I can pretty much guarantee, since it's been very popular. But now it's just no restriction on who can wear what. Sourlad says, I just need a recreation of that guy in boxers with 2 axes jumping off a cliff into icy waters. Well, they've always had the buff body skin, which is basically just a person in their underwear, super jacked. And you give a person with that skin one of the dual blades that looks like axes, and then you pretty much have that, what you're talking about, right? But yeah, in the old games, before there's any sort of cosmetic options, you were at the mercy of whatever you crafted. So, like my friends always said, if you want to optimize your skills and build an armor set, but it looks like a clown suit, well, you're looking like a clown. And if you want to look cool with the uniform set, you have to go with worse skills. And now that's no longer a thing. Red Dragon saying, hope they don't mess up the face hair of guys in Wilds. I've been seeing clips of people with like really epic beards and stuff. I think it's going to be more comprehensive than it was in World. So facial hair is probably going to be really detailed, given they're using a better, more high-powered engine. The character customization looks really good. Oh, Sarlad's taken off. Alright, Sarlad. I will catch you later. Thanks for tuning in the stream. We will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow is SMT day. So I hope you have a good rest of your evening. If you got work, don't work too hard. Watch out for Seth. Make sure he doesn't screw up someone's order. And I'll catch you in the next one. All right. We did get a stretch from Sarlad. Oh. Red Dragon said I can make my real OC. Yeah, just the basic hunter models I've been seeing people using in the demo look really nice. And I imagine they'll add all sorts of different hairstyles and all the stuff they normally do. I've been trying to figure out if I want to design a brand new OC for Wilds, like I've done in the last couple games, or if I want to adapt one of my existing characters into what goes in the game. Because for a lot of them, not my Rise playthrough specifically, but in a lot of them, the character's named after one of my actual legit characters I've designed, and uses a kind of a weapon similar to what that character in the story would use. But for Rise, my character's name is Frina. She's not based on anyone that I wrote. I just came up with a kind of a unique character for that game. So I don't know. I should go dig up my character name from one of my other ones and see who I used for Gunlance. Like do like a canonical, like the daughter of that old character that used Gunlance is now in Wilds or something like that. That could be fun. Okay, let's take a look at what we've done. I think this is actually pretty functional. I knew this one was going to be the hardest. Leviathans, like I said, are a little bit difficult to draw. But I think we have something pretty functional here. We have the long sort of body, but unlike the volcanic design and kind of fins you see on Agnaktor, we have more of the plates and ridges and armor like you see on Diablos. And the head's kind of a mix. We have the lower jaws kind of like Agnaktor's, but the sort of fangs on the top and the horns and the frill look like Diablos. Red Dragon says, I can try and make an OC in games too. I tried making OC in games, but Rise wasn't good at character design. Yeah, I think the character avatar customization in Rise wasn't nearly as in-depth as World and Iceborne, because it was, working on lower power hardware for the Switch initially. That's not going to be a thing for Wilds. Wilds being developed on current gen architecture, so it's going to be similar to World and Iceborne. Characters looked really good in that game. The kind of semi-realistic model looked really good. Some of the NPC characters looked a little uncanny. Like, I don't really mind the handler from World, despite a lot of people seeming to hate her, but her face design was a little bit uncanny. That's one thing I did agree with. Didn't look like bad, but it looked a little bit slightly off. The characters that they've shown off in the NPCs for World do not have that problem. They all look really cool. There's the Smith lady, Gemma, the blonde, who's got like the really crazy hairstyle, and her outfit's a nod to like a bunch of the older games. She looks pretty cool. Alma is your handler in Wilds. She's kind of the quiet, bookish lady with the glasses. Kind of more of a simple but effective design. And they have like the cool other hunters you meet up with. Look pretty awesome. All right, let's see if we can hide some of these other ones. I think these are on the same layer. So this is a pretty good rough sketch for Diaktor, and this one didn't end up using that. So we'll save this one a way I can find the layer. Iconic says art's looking great. Oh, thanks. We're doing some pretty basic sketch stuff here, but I am happy with how this turned out, despite it being probably the toughest of the three. So I think what we can do, we can get started on the next one. If we can get at least partway through the next fusion and sketching stuff out, that'll put us on a pretty good pace for stream. So what is that going to involve? If we go back to our references, now we're going to hide Agnaktor, and we need to put these two together. We have Big Angry Dino Pickle, Deviljho, and the same twin-horned flying wyvern, Diablos. This one, what did I say this one was called? Devilos, that's right. So for this one, we talked about it a bit at the start. The main body type, let me get my pencil back here, is going to be flying type. So like we see with Diablos, with the wing arms, that's going to be the main body type. But we want to make sure we're incorporating a lot of the features from Deviljho. So probably going to be a pretty bulky monster, but also something that can fly. So maybe something with a similar body type to Gravios, one of the older flying wyverns from the older generations. Giant rock wyvern, which did not look like it should be able to fly because it's essentially composed of boulders. Like a volcanic rock wyvern, very heavy, and uses fire. But that thing could fly. It could lift itself off the air with its wings. It's kind of the equivalent of seeing a dump truck flying in the air. So we can take that sort of idea, and the real challenge is going to be coming up with a pose that's going to allow us to see all the attributes of this as a flying type wyvern, but still show off all the bits that go into each fusion component. So what I was initially thinking, and this might be a little bit difficult to render out, might have to try a couple times, but I was thinking kind of a rearing up pose like this. Both of these two don't really have long necks. I guess Deviljho sort of does. Joe's got kind of a bit of a neck and then a really big head. But my initial thought was kind of like a pose like this. Sort of a wyvern equivalent of the come at me bro pose. And then it would become a matter of trying to dial in all the details. So we might do something. If we used a pose like this, maybe we'd do kind of like a mouth open roaring pose like that. I got the angry eyes. A little bit tough because the angle is a bit kind of head on, Another option would be to take a look at Diablos' pose since we have the wings here and potentially adapt different aspects of the pose and change it slightly for the one we have. So if we think of where everything sort of falls here, I think this one's going to have kind of a long tail because Deviljho's got a long tail. You can even have the other wing sort of unfurled this way instead of being folded in. That's actually not bad. I think I like that better just automatically. Needs a little bit more sort of fleshing out, but yeah, I think we can work with that. Might have to iterate on this a couple times, but I'm already liking sort of the positioning a little bit better than just the YMCA pose over here. And I can replicate that again if I need to. We'll kind of clear that off. I think the wing might need to be a little bigger. But that's not bad. Likewise, I have to go back a little bit more. Like I've talked about on stream before, I'm not super good at dynamic poses. I'm trying to get better, hence the exercise here of practicing. Okay, let's see if we can clean up some of the stuff here to show what's being obscured by what. And I have even more of a difficulty doing it with humanoid type characters. I think I've talked about that before too. Which again, just need the practice, but doing like really dynamic humanoid character poses is not something I'm good at. Iconic says doing good, I'd say. Oh, thanks, Iconic. It's a work in progress. I'm trying to get better. But like you folks have seen when we do character studies here every once in a while, and we will get back to those in the near future at some point. But for me, I like doing concepts, so to me designing costumes and basic character design elements is more interesting than fully fleshed out poses. So more often than not, I do like a neutral standing 3/4 pose for a character. You know, just the arm hanging down like that. Maybe the arm will be over here. Maybe the arm will be over here. Hey, how you doing? But that's my default just because I spend more time focusing on the outfit and all the character design elements. Which is why when I do prototyping for a project and I know I'm going to work with someone, I say, here's the concept. make it dynamic. And folks that are much better at it than me, if I wanted to have this character doing like a real crazy, like, anime pose. Again, it's not the greatest example, but like jumping up in the air, like pointing towards the camera, doing like a spirit bomb. And the stuff closer to the camera is more like higher scale than, or larger, because the camera's kind of pointing in that direction. There, that's supposed to be like a spirit bomb type thing. Yeah, it's much easier for me to turn that over to someone who can realize that better than I can. Red Dragon says, turn the stick man, make the stick man shiny. Pretty much, the way I do like rough primary and basics pose design in general is to use simple shapes. But like Red Dragon saying, you can do it based on like a skeleton too. So that's another way people do it. Like, we'll do like a real mini art overview here. If you have a humanoid person with standard humanoid proportions, arms are a little bit long, but you kind of get the idea. You can sketch out kind of the proportions just with like stick figure elements, and then from there use circles, ellipses, and round bits to flesh out all of the different things like that. Iconic says, I got ideas but not the skills to make it physical. My skill points went into writing. There's nothing wrong with that, but I always tell people, even if you aren't good at drawing, and I wouldn't exactly say I'm good at drawing, I'm pretty average at it. If you really want to build up your skill points in drawing, it's just practice. Even if you are not going full digital, because it is an investment to invest in tools to do digital. Like Red Dragon could tell you, he's got a setup to do this stuff too. Even before you do that, just pencil on paper and practicing control over just getting the pencil to do what you want, and then starting simple. And another thing that people talk about, which is also important to remember, is you can use references when you're first learning. If you have a style that you like from like manga or anime or comics or anything, you can use that as kind of a basis to learn, and then you want to develop your own style later, so you're not just wholesale ripping off someone. Even tracing something that you like the style of to learn is good. Tracing as a general practice long term, not a good idea. But when you're just learning and you're trying to say, okay, like, how are these people doing their poses and anatomy and whatnot, there's nothing wrong with that. And likewise, getting like anatomy studies is good. Looking at figures. I have a couple of posable models that I haven't used in a while, but what I would do is I would take the model and put the model on my desk. And let's say we had the model right here. I want to do a pose that looks like this. This is a disco pose, apparently. What I would do is I would set the model up and then take a picture of it using my camera, back when we had cameras instead of phones. And then I would put the photo on my computer and then sketch out the shapes over the pose to kind of get familiar with, okay, if we're looking at this angle, here's how things change in scale, which help for some of the kind of basic stuff. Now Dragon says, stick to shapes and then to flash to finish art. Yeah, that's why I kind of use simple shapes and little rough stuff that I do. because it's easy to sort of put things together and kind of adjust on the fly. I know there's the model stuff in Clip Studio. I haven't used it in a while. It does work pretty well though, so you can do a similar thing using the 3D models, and it's even easier because then you can pose them however you want and then sketch out over them your actual stuff. I always forget it's there, but that's true. The one time I used it was to have the figure do the Jacko pose because it's the funny haha meme pose. But yeah, it's just a matter of looking at tools and finding something that's going to help you develop and just practice. If I spent more time drawing and less time doing all the other stuff that I do, I would be a lot better. So I've been trying to spend more time practicing. I have been working on the Lightbane Temple character sketches and stuff that we've done on stream before. I am almost halfway done. I'm almost finished with the Natural Order, and then I'll need to do the ones for the Legion. And the album art has been coming along well too. I am in pretty close contact with Rai, who's doing the album art, and they are coming up with some really cool ideas. So I think you folks are really gonna enjoy checking out the stuff we put together for Halloween. Once I get through this weekend with the convention, I need to power through a whole bunch more of the sketches so I can start inking and coloring those. That will be to do next week. Okay, what we're doing is we're going to scale this up and then start working on fine-tuning things with this and see if we can refine the pose a little bit more now that we have a really, really rough sort of thing. I'm going to drop the transparency down a bit more so I can see what I'm doing. I'm still not entirely sure what I want to do for this thing's head. Once I kind of build on this pose a little bit more, I'm going to do this kind of similar thing where I come up with some potential headshots. It would be funny if we gave this thing little tiny stubby forearms like Devil Joe, but made them wings, little tiny four wings. But that wouldn't really make much sense from a practicality standpoint. It'd be on model though. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about the specific details. Let's work on just getting the pose defined. I think I do want to keep Diabolos's axe-like club tail. That's a pretty defining trait for that monster. I might have to workshop that a little bit. We'll just kind of rough in. Shape looks like a spiky axe almost. this trailing edge here is the wing finger. I still don't know what that's called in flying creatures. This right here. It's like a finger that creates sort of the frame of the wing. Wing finger? Winger? I don't know what that's called. I'm not an ornithologist. Could give a little bit more of a neck. Let's see how that looks. Not bad. I do think this has more potential for giving us something that we can work with, more so than the initial one that I tried. But I'm gonna go ahead and save my progress here. What we'll do is we'll come up with some ideas for the actual head and how this thing's gonna look. Red Dragon says, if you mean the wings, I believe they're just called fingers. I guess that would make sense. I was just curious if this had an official name. You can see where I'm pointing here on the Diablos. It functions like a finger, because if you think of like bats, and I'm not a biologist here, but bats have like the arms that go up. And if you think of these things that go onto the wings that kind of under the membrane, it looks like this, right? And if you look at the way they're actually constructed, they are kind of like fingers. I don't know if they're jointed, but the webbing is here like this. And birds kind of do something similar. Of course, they got feathers. But I was wondering if that has a certain terminology. Yeah, I know they're joined, but I mean jointed, like opposably jointed. They don't function like your hands. I don't think they have like musculature that can cause them to like grab things because they're just flexible for the wings. So I don't know if they've got joints, but they are joined. I don't know. Again, I'm not a biologist. We're dealing with dragons and monsters and whatnot. Yeah, I guess it would be like a thumb, wouldn't it? I think the real question you gotta ask yourself from a biology standpoint is the elder dragon body type. I'm trying to think. There's nothing in the natural world that we know of that has 6 limbs that function like an elder dragon. At least I'm trying to think. So if we think of like Kushala's body type is the easiest example. Here's the head. The angry eyes. 4 limbs, arms and legs, but then your wings up here, right? traditional, like Western dragon body type. 2 legs, wings. Yeah. As far as I can tell, there's nothing in the natural world that has that type of anatomy. Which makes me wonder how the dragon imagery of lore came to be to look like this, at least in the West. Eastern dragons look more like a leviathan. They have long serpentine bodies. Oh, cool. I see what you sent me in Discord, Red Dragon. It's like an actual anatomy diagram. You should post that in the media share so other people can see that. I've never seen an actual breakdown of terminology before. That's kind of cool. All right, let's think about what this thing's head's going to look like. So we've got very pronounced features for Deviljho. We could do like primarily Deviljho features as far as the jaws go, but then give it horns. It's got to have horns in order to be true to Diabolos's design. I think I had a concept for this, but I don't remember where it went, so we're just going to do it from scratch again. I had this idea, and we'll see if it kind of fleshes out. One thing Deviljho's known for is it's got all these spikes on its lower jaw and like its chin. It's basically Jay Leno on crack. So what we could do is sort of take the pronounced fangs on Diabolos and give it kind of a more pronounced jaw like Deviljho, and then kind of work on the idea of the frill. We can even go, is it a Styracosaurus? It's a type of ceratopsian that has a really like spiky frill instead of just the rounded edge like a Triceratops. That could work. I had something in my designs that looked similar to this, but again, I'm just kind of recreating it here. Red Dragon says if they're real dragons, they'd be shaped more like Skyrim dragons, kind of like in Souls or Elden Ring. Because aren't the dragons in Skyrim are wyverns, aren't they? They've got like this type of body, a little bit more kind of long and serpentine, but they don't have two sets of limbs and wings. It's just two sets, right? Wing arms and then legs. I haven't played Skyrim, but I remember seeing like a lot of the dragons. Yeah, wing arms. Okay. Yeah, Monster Hunter does something kind of interesting with the whole concept of dragons, like true dragons, because like the classification of elder dragons in the Monster Hunter games is not just like reptilian creatures that look like your western or even eastern dragons. It's more of like a classification of the entity's power. And so you have things like Atal Ka in Generations Ultimate, which is not a dragon at all. It's a big mantis. It's a big gold, like Egyptian looking mantis. But it's considered an elder dragon because of its power. It's a dangerous threat. Not necessarily like the cataclysmic black dragons like Alatreon or Fatalis, but still enough that it's a major threat to safety. Likewise, another one of my favorite elder dragons from Monster Hunter is the final boss of Base Generations, and that's Nakarkos. Nakarkos is looks like a big dragon skull with these long dragon skull arms, and you find out it's actually like a big cuttlefish. It looks like a big mollusk, almost like a Cthulhu-esque mollusk that's covered itself in the bones of all the wyverns and dragons and everything it's killed. Super neat monster. I'd love to see Nakarkos or Atal Ka come back. I think for this one, I'm going to have this one be Dragon Element. Since... Actually, no. I got to think about this logically. We said the Leviathan would be neutral. Yeah, so this one would be Dragon. It's either that or the Brute one. Fusion number... Or Fusion A would have to be Dragon. Or Fire. I think I'm going to make this one Dragon. That one can be Fire. It makes it a little bit easier. Red Dragon says I'm a big dragon nut. I can tell. You definitely know a lot about dragons. Makes sense. They are cool. I feel like they're becoming a bit common in a lot of media because of things like Game of Thrones. To the point where I think some people are getting some media fatigue seeing dragons featured everywhere, but I still think they're neat. What I'm doing is I'm creating these kind of vein-like patterns. This would be similar to what Deviljho's got in its body, where you could see the dragon energy kind of coursing through it when it gets mad. Red Dragon says, random dragon theory, their sex is based on egg temperament. So that determines like the gender of the offspring. That'd be an interesting theory. I have not seen BBC thing on dragons. I don't have cable, so I don't have. Well, I don't watch TV at all, but I've never seen it. Sounds interesting though. What I would think would be kind of a cool thing to research would be the origins of dragon lore in different cultures across the world, since they show up in Eastern and Western culture and in, South American cultures and some like Mayan and Incan cultures, and they show up in pretty much every major culture in some capacity. You see it in like Hindu lore, you see them in obviously Eastern and like Asian lore. But I'd be curious to see how, from like a historical perspective, each culture came up with their ideas for dragons. My guess is probably a mix of like superstition and maybe finding dinosaur fossils, because dinosaurs are pretty much the closest thing to dragons, right? So I think it would probably be something like that, where someone in an ancient village comes across a preserved pterosaur skeleton. They see this big winged creature, and they kind of form their mythology from that. That would be my guess. I think there's some references in like old religion and biblical texts too, but I don't know imagery wise what they talk about, because I don't really study religion at all. But the question of how do we get like Western stereotypical dragons and wyverns in Western lore, but you get the more serpentine dragons in Eastern lore. And a lot of times dragons are revered in Eastern lore and they're feared in Western lore. They're seen as like destructive beasts, but in a lot of Eastern lore, not all, but a lot of Eastern lore, dragons are considered divine beings that you don't mess with, gods. And again, I'd be curious to see what caused a lot of that to develop. Red Dragon says, another theory is when dragons die, the heat sacks they use to throw fire, burn, and turn their skeleton to ash. I've seen a couple different theories on what gives dragon or draconic creatures the ability to breathe fire. Like in Monster Hunter, if you think of Rathalos, right? Poster child for the series, the Wraths have a flame sack organ that has like a powder. It's considered like a combustible powder they secrete in that sack, and when they expel it into the air, it ignites. It's not a chemical, it's more like an oxidation that causes it to combust when it hits the air. So when you kill a Rathalos and you get its flame sack, you're getting the organ itself that's creating the fire, or the flammable material that becomes fire. Versus other lore has the dragons essentially expelling like a type of flammable gas or vapor that functions almost like a flamethrower, and they use kind of like a catalyst, either like heat or sometimes like their teeth, to spark what they're exhaling into a flammable blast. I have not seen Rain of Fire, but I remember when it came out ages ago. It's a old like medieval movie about dragons. I remember Dragonheart. I have seen that one. Sean Connery was in that one. Oh, does Rain of Fire take place in like the modern age? It's been forever, man. I don't know much about that movie. Is it dragons show up in like modern day society? I think this particular design for the head has some potential. I might work on changing the design of the frill so it doesn't look like hair. This thing is not supposed to have like really spiky Super Saiyan hair. Maybe I can make it a little more bony in texture. but it's got the right combination of elements. And as far as drawing it on this particular pose, that's going to be a challenge too. Oh, okay, Rain of Fire, humans unearth a dragon nest. What I want to know is for the other elements, because dragons have different elemental affinities in most lore, right? What's the biology behind a lightning dragon? Are they like an electric eel, where they have the ability to store electricity? If that's the case, how do they breathe it? Do they have an electrical organ instead of a flame sac that stores electricity? And if that's the case, how do they expel it from their mouths? Or likewise for an ice dragon, something that spits ice. Is it a fluid that freezes when it hits the air? Or is it a super cold fluid in general that just becomes like a mist when it comes out? So much fictional lore that I know a lot of people have thought about, since, again, dragons have been in media for hundreds of years. Iconic says, I remember as a kid, I thought humans at some point could breathe fire and ice because how we can warm our hands with our breath in the winter and blow on things to cool them off. Well, you can breathe fire, but you have to use a flammable fluid in order to do it, like a fire breather. And if you screw it up, then you can seriously injure yourself, because if you don't, way I understand it for like fire breathing, if you don't expel it's like an alcohol-based liquid, I think. If you don't expel it with enough force for it to completely exit your mouth, and it's like if you were to spit it out like a stream from a hose, and you hit fire, just like if you have gas coming out of a gasoline pump, and it hits something flammable, it's going to go up the stream to the source and explode. So if you don't expel the liquid from your mouth forcefully enough that it's going to stay out of your mouth, then it'll go into your mouth and ignite, and you'll have a very bad day. That's my understanding. Red Dragon says, I have another book of mine that takes a look at as if dragons are real, like, oh, by nation, huh? That's cool. I imagine it would be kind of like you see in any sort of life form that lives in different biomes and evolves differently. My guess is the anatomy and physiology of the dragons would be shaped by the environment they live in normally. But again, if you think of fire dragons, ice dragons, lightning dragons, pretty much every major element, storm dragons. Like in Monster Hunter, elder dragons are thought to be like gods because they have control over things like the weather or some aspect of the natural world they can control. Like Kushala Daora controls wind. It's a storm dragon, despite being made of metal. So it's a metallic storm dragon. Teostra is a fire dragon. It can control heat, and its scales ignite, which is why it blows everything up. Oh, USA are the biggest. Interesting. I think it'd be kind of a cool reference to have something that chronicles all of like the dragon lore and then shows the differences between all the different cultures across the world. All right, before we get ready to wrap up, let's kind of take stock of what we've done here as kind of a recap. I do think this is a good start for the final, or the third of the 4 fusions. It's not the final yet, but Red Dragon says Africa have more land dragons. That would make sense since there's a lot of land in general. It'd be more like earth or rock dragons, just based on kind of the biomes, I would assume. Okay, let's go over to... We'll keep the references here. In fact, I'll go grab Agnaktor, put it back on screen here. So let's compare. These are not scaled, really. In fact, I'm probably going to draw them in the proportions you see here and kind of make the scale similar, just so I can capture the detail. And then I'll scale them into whatever I need to for the final version of the renders. But our first one, Agnajo, we said fire-based brute wyvern. Don't think there's going to be a whole lot to change with this one, but we'll see. I might tweak some of the designs. But we did this one last session. The main one we did today. In fact, I need to scale you up. You're a little too small. This is Diaktor. Combining Diablos and Agnaktor. This is a neutral element Leviathan. Something you would see in an arid, probably desert climate, not necessarily volcanic, but heavily armored, resistant to the weather and elements, but also able to burrow underground to ruin your day. And then the basic prototypes for the last one. This is Devilos. And the next step will be coming up with an actual sketched out primary based on the pose. I think I'm going to go with some variation of this. I might have to scale it up a bit more and then mess around with the details to be able to draw things like the head, because trying to fit all the head details into that small of a pose is going to be tough. But I think it's doable. And then once we finish all of the sketches, it'll be inking and coloring each of them and then doing the final. The final is going to be very, very interesting depending on our results. I don't know how it's going to look. Sketching that one is probably going to take an entire session, if not more, just because we have to combine 3 fusions. But the idea is to have the fusions done and have them on hand so that we can look and say, all right, here are 3 fusion creatures. We need to pick the elements from each one and put them into one giant god-being abomination. And so overall, pretty good progress. I thought for sure I'd only be able to get through one. But despite us having a lot of discussions on Monster Hunter and dragons and dragon lore and anatomy, we got almost 2 done. So I'm happy with that. Let us take a look and see, before we jump off here, let me go see who is online that we can raid. And we'll get ready to wrap up. Let's see, Spectral Noct is online. I see one of my other peers, Mycelia, is online. She is playing, BioShock, huh? The first one? BioShock Remastered? I feel like she seems to be online whenever I'm doing art, which is just a coincidence. She's an art VTuber in addition to games. So we can go ahead and head over there and see how Mushroom Lady's doing. Let me go ahead and cue this up, and we will pause BGM and go to outro while all the stuff loads. And while all the stuff is getting set up, we will call that a stream. Like I mentioned before, we'll be back tomorrow, roughly the same time, unless I get a chance to start earlier. and we will be taking a look at the next leg in SMT5 Vengeance. We'll be continuing on with Pretty Demon Boy's adventures. Next week we'll be starting some new stuff. We'll swap out No Man's Sky for... I think we're going to start Portrait of Ruin next week, which should be fun. I'm really going to enjoy talking about that game, because that game's one of my favorites. But in the meantime, thanks for hanging out, folks. Hope you all have a good rest of your evening, morning, night, and we'll be back tomorrow. So again, take it easy. Now let's go see how Mycelia's doing in BioShock. Catch you later.